His men formed up around him, and Dalinar led the way further down the street. Before too long, he could make out the bulk of the enemy still fighting ahead, harried by his main army. He halted his elites, contemplative. "Orders, sir?" Thaka, captain of the elites, asked. "Raid those buildings," Dalinar said, pointing at a line of homes. "Let's see how well they fight while they watch us rounding up their families." Thaka nodded, shouting the orders. Dalinar reached for some water. He'd need to meet up with Sadeas, and something slammed into Dalinar's shoulder. He caught only a brief sight of it, a black blur that hit with the force of a roundhouse kick. It threw him down, and pain flared up from his side. "An arrow?" he said, blinking as he found himself lying on the ground. A storming arrow sprouted from his right shoulder, one with a long, thick shaft. It had gone right through the breastplate. "Bright Lord," Thaka said, kneeling, shielding Dalinar with his body. "Kalat, Bright Lord, are you—" "Who in damnation shot that?" Dalinar demanded. "Up there," Jenin said, pointing at the ridge above town. "That's got to be over 300 yards, Dalinar said, shoving Thaka aside and standing. "That can't—" He was watching, so he was able to jump out of the way of the next arrow, which dropped a mere foot from him, slamming against the stone ground. Dalinar stared at it, then started shouting, "Horses! Where are the storming horses? Had the fires delayed them?" No, fortunately. They stood with the rear guard of the elites, and men came trotting forward as Dalinar's order was passed, bringing all 11 mounts. Dalinar had to dodge another arrow as he seized the reins of Stormlight, his black gelding, and heaved himself into the saddle. He galloped back the way he'd come in, trailed by 10 of his best men. There had to be a way up that slope. There, a rocky set of switchbacks, shallow enough that he didn't mind running full night up them. He was more worried that by the time he reached the top, his quarry would have escaped. He burst onto the top of the ridge, and an arrow slammed into his left breast, going right through the breastplate and nearly throwing him from the saddle. Damnation! He hung on somehow, clenching the reins in one hand and leaning low, watching ahead as the archer, still a distant figure, stood upon a rocky knob and launched another arrow, and another. Storms, the fellow was quick. Dalinar jerked Stormlight to one side, then the other, feeling this thrumming sense of the thrill return and push back the pain. Hooves made a clatter on stone as another arrow zipped past his face, dangerously close. Ahead, the archer finally seemed to grow alarmed and leapt from his perch to flee. Dalinar charged Stormlight over that lip a moment later, jumping the horse after the fleeing archer, who turned out to be a man in his 20s, wearing rugged clothing. Dalinar had the option to run him down, but instead galloped Stormlight right past and kicked the archer in the back, sending him sprawling. Dalinar pulled up his horse, then turned it about to pass by the groaning archer, who lay in a heap amid spilled black arrows. Dalinar's men caught up as he climbed roughly from the saddle, an arrow sprouting from each shoulder. He seized the archer, who had finally struggled to his feet and was moving, dazed, for his belt knife. Dalinar turned the fellow about, noting the blue tattoo on his cheek. The archer gasped, staring at Dalinar, who was covered in soot from the fires, his face a mask of blood from the nose and the cut scalp, stuck with not one, but 2 arrows. "You waited until my helm was off," Dalinar demanded. "You are an assassin. You were sent here specifically to watch for me." The man winced as Dalinar gripped him hard, but then nodded. "Amazing," Dalinar said, letting go of the fellow. "Show me that shot again." "How far is that, Thaka? I'm right, aren't I? Over 300 yards? "Almost 4, Thaka said, "but with a height advantage." "Still," Dalinar said, stepping up to the lip of the ridge. He looked back at the befuddled archer. "Well, grab your bow." "My bow," the archer said. "Are you deaf, man? Go get it." The archer regarded the 10 armed elites on horseback, grim-faced and dangerous, before wisely deciding to obey. He picked up his bow and a few arrows, then stepped hesitantly over to Dalinar, giving one glance to the similar shafts that were still sticking out of him. "Went right through my storming armor," Dalinar muttered, shading his eyes. To his right, the armies clashed down below, and his main body of elites had come up to press the flank. The rear guard had found some civilians and was shoving them out into the street. "Pick a course," Dalinar said, pointing toward an empty square where a skirmish had happened. "Stick an arrow in one of those, if you can." The archer licked his lips, still seeming confused. Finally, he took a spyglass off his belt and studied the area. "The one in blue," he finally said, "near the overturned cart." Dalinar squinted, then nodded. Nearby, Thaka had climbed off his horse and had slid out his sword, resting it on his shoulder. A not-so-subtle warning. The archer contemplated this, then drew his bow and launched a single, black-fletched arrow. It soared true, sinking into the chosen corpse. "Stormfather," Dalinar said, lowering his hand. "Thaka, before today I'd have bet you half the princedom that such a shot wasn't possible." He turned to the archer. "What's your name, assassin?" The man raised his chin but didn't reply. "Well, either way, welcome to my elites." "Somebody get this fellow a horse." "What?" the archer said. "I tried to kill you." "Yes, from a distance, which shows remarkably good judgment." "I have use for someone with your skills." "We're enemies." Dalinar nodded toward the town below, where the beleaguered enemy army was at long last surrendering. "Not anymore. Looks like we're all allies now." There we are.